Aloha, and welcome to this brief guide about developing your 6 to 12 week instructional plan. My name is Mutiu Fagbayi. I'm with Performance Fact, and I'd like to begin by setting some context. We suggest that the primary purpose of planning is alignment, and alignment is the process of getting all your arrows going in the same direction, such that people and process and program and structures, everything is aligned towards common goals and towards the priorities that you've established for your, your team or your organization. In the context of your 6 to 12 week instructional plan, what we want what you want that plan to align to is your school improvement plan. That school improvement plan is a representation of your aspirations and your desires for the school year. And with the 6 to 12 week planning process, you get a chance to chunk your annual plan into smaller chunks of either 6 weeks or 9 weeks or 12 weeks. So it's very important to keep in mind that the starting point for your cycle of inquiry plans still remains your school improvement plan, and that your cycle of inquiry plans are really just smaller chunks of your annual plan. There are four simple steps to the instructional planning process that we recommend. Step one, it's about making clear what the expectations are relative to what students will learn and be able to do. And so step one is about the essential learnings and the standards. Step two, it's about what the adults have to do well in order for all students to make progress towards, or better yet, to master those standards. So step two is about your professional practices and strategies. Step three recognizes that not all students will get it at the same time or at the same rate. And that's where intervention and enrichment come in. And finally, step four is to pace out your 6 to 12 week plan in weekly chunks. So, what among those standards for the 6 to 12 week cycle are you going to implement in week one? Which ones for week two? Which ones for week three? And so on. So, those are the four steps. And now I'd like to walk you through the template that we've put together. Now, for those of you who may already have your own instructional planning process, if it works for you, I urge you to stick to it. You don't have to change. What you may want to do, however, is to do a reality check of your planning template against these 8 rubric items we have here. It will take about 1 or 2 minutes to just do the reality check. If you meet these conditions, I urge you to just keep using your own planning process. For those who might be looking for a planning template, here's the one that we recommend. It will take you about 35 to 50 minutes to complete as a team. Step one, again, is defining the standards, setting the SMART goal, and very importantly, defining upfront how you will assess learning. So it's not enough to just define what students will know and be able to do. It's equally paramount that you articulate up front how you will assess how well students have mastered those standards. Step two, it's about adult practices. That also is in 3 steps. We begin by focusing on the practices relating to teaching or to instruction. Then we identify the practices related to how leadership will support teaching. And finally, practices or strategies relating to how the organizational behaviors will support leadership and also support facilitate teaching. So, as you define your practices and strategies, be mindful of how well you are addressing the needs of all of your students. You will need at least one practice or strategy that will be essentially tier one in an MTSS or RTI sense, a strategy or practice that will apply to all your students. For example, it could be a common instructional approach that you all take. It could be taking something like Reader's Workshop or Writer's Workshop as a common strategy that all students will be exposed to. Then you need at least one strategy or practice that applies to tier 2 and or tier 3 depending on the makeup of your student body. The important point we want to make with this reality check is that you want to be sure that the strategies you identify do indeed accommodate the needs of all types of learners that are in your classroom or in your school. Then do the same thing with the leadership practices, keeping in mind that the primary purpose of the leadership practices is to support teaching. So there should be a one-to-one correspondence between what leadership does and what we expect to be happening around instruction. Similarly, for your organizational practices, this might get into things like parent engagement. It might also include things support you might need from the district level, but those are designed to support leadership and also to support teaching. That's step two. Step three is about the intervention, and here you have the option of identifying intervention or enrichment for individual students or for student groups as applicable in your particular case. Now we have a four-part performance level here: intensive, strategic, benchmark, and above benchmark. If those labels don't work for you, feel free to substitute your own equivalent levels of performance for students. And then finally, the intervention or enrichment strategy for each student or each student group. Step four is your week by week pacing. In step one, you identify the standards that you will cover during the 6 to 12 week cycle. Here in step four, you get a chance to identify which of those standards you will implement in week one, how you will assess progress towards those week one standards, and what peer collaboration you will engage in to make sure that you and your colleagues can pull off your week one priorities. And then repeat the same thing for week two, which standards, assessment, if they're different, and also your PDM collaboration. So there you have it. Those are the four main steps. I want to mention a couple things that you might want to consider also. Give some thought to having um, a task analysis template. There's some specific things that need to get done during the 6 to 12 week cycle. So use a template like this one to identify specifically what needs to get done, by when and by whom. For example, one of the things you might have to do is to schedule time for teachers to get together to do collaborative analysis of student work, or time for them to meet to develop a common assessment rubric. So those kinds of things you might put down here, right? And this becomes your to-do list for the cycle. And finally, in the template, take a moment again to map your own plan against the 8 questions in the self-assessment rubric. Again, it will take about a minute or two to just reassure yourself that you have, in fact, developed a really strong 6 to 12 week instructional plan. So that's it as far as the planning process is concerned. In terms of additional supports, we do have what we call show me's for virtually every product or tool we have. That's a completed sample that you can access. Give us a call, send us an email, or you can check out our website. So this is an example of an elementary school 6 to 12 week instructional plan that's available for you to use as a guide only, not as the only way to get things done. So in closing, I want to let you know that if you have any further questions, again, you can check our website, performancefact.com, or our proprietary Eye on the Goal web tool, which has a lot of the resources I just went through, or just send us an email at contact@performancefact.com. Thanks for listening. Good luck and aloha.